We understand the curse that was slavery, white people do, and we say that was bad, but we miss the blessing of slavery.
The blessing of what? And plot twist, that was my pastor. I also had a pastor who would pray for women's bodies to be restored so that they would bleed for their future husbands.
I have hundreds of emails about girls' hymens being restored.
So I guess past Jubilee just really knew how to pick them. My ex-husband and I went to this church, you know, the one that thought that he was never going to die and that he was going to own the entire company of Disney before he almost ended up unaliving me. That one. We went to this church out in Atlanta, and it is a huge mega church, and I don't remember him saying anything this crazy. In fact, I remember the church being really boring and lacking hardly any substance, but wow. You might think I am taking this out of context, although how could we say blessings of slavery in a good context? But let's watch the rest of that clip.
It actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in.
Yes.
And
yeah, that didn't make it any better.
Slavery, white people do. And we say that was bad, but we miss the blessing.
As I mentioned numerous times, I was raised Southern Baptist, and that was an unusual experience to say the least. The compulsory brainwashing at summer church camps, we couldn't dance, the guest speakers who would come in and tell us that if we played Led Zeppelin albums backwards, we would hear the voice of Satan. And granted, this was long after the advent of the cassette tape and CD-ROM, so who would be doing that? But I don't recall there being any efforts to rebrand slavery and white privilege. That seems really super weird. And if you're in seminary now, is Mein Kampf required reading? Well, this has been Doc for Diesel Punk Industries. I'm super confused. Thanks for watching, and as always, Crunchy White Pimp forever.
Watch this video and then let's talk about it.
50 years ago, or 200 years ago, when the blacks were slaves, did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally 200 years ago to protest against slavery? Did they? No. What did they do? Well, a lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime. Let us help build a church for you, dear folks. And they loved them and taught them how to read so they can read the Bible. And here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They prayed. They sought God's face and they turned from their wicked ways. And God made slavery illegal through several white presidents, right?
All right, so here's the truth. Slavery did not end because enslaved people humbled themselves and prayed. And it did not disappear the moment a law was signed. Slavery was challenged. It was challenged through resistance. It was challenged through rebellion, organizing, and war. And then it shifted into new forms that lasted long after 1865. And so what's at stake right now is memory, because when history gets softened, oppression starts looking like kindness and resistance starts looking like silence. I'm Dr. Michael H. Ford, and let's talk about what you just saw. First, the pastor asked whether enslaved people ever went to Washington, D.C. to rally. Enslaved people could not safely protest in public the way we imagine today. Public assembly could have meant capture, punishment, or death. But black political resistance absolutely existed. Free black leaders petitioned Congress for decades. National black conventions began in 1830, and slavery in Washington, D.C. was abolished in 1862 after sustained political pressure, not passive prayer. Next, the claim that plantation owners lovingly taught enslaved people to read the Bible. The system was built to prevent that. After uprisings like the Stoner Rebellion in 1739 and Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831, many southern states passed laws criminalizing black literacy. Enslaved people learned anyway, secretly from one another, because reading meant power. Then the claim that black people turned from their wicked ways. That flips morality. Slavery was the evil. Enslaved people resisted through escape, sabotage, revolt, abolition, organizing, and military service. Nearly 200,000 black men fought for the Union during the Civil War to help dismantle the system holding them captive. Now the part that often gets skipped. The 13th Amendment in 1865 abolished slavery except as punishment for a crime. That exception enabled black codes, convict leasing, and forced labor well into the 20th century. Later came sharecropping, Jim Crow laws, redlining, and exclusion from wealth building. Different systems, same control. And finally, language matters. Saying the blacks reduces people to a category, not a community. That framing has always been used to make injustice sound distant and deserved. Slavery didn't end cleanly, freedom didn't arrive all at once, and progress has never come without pressure. So when someone says slavery ended because black people humbled themselves and prayed, what they're offering isn't history, it's a comfort story. And comfort stories have always been easier than truth. Healing starts with knowing. Follow for more.
You see that talk over there? That shows you the impunity
that these people have. Probably they could just say these things open on a national television and just get away with it. And this tells you, anytime a white person tells you that they don't have a privilege, think twice. The statement is, black slavery is white blessing. Somebody is saying that in front of a national television where majority of people are going to be watching this video. It's not even him about saying that. It's about him confessing how they have always gained, how they have always benefited from this system that made black people be where they are. And they have the guts to say in front of a television that, you see, that what happened to you was a blessing to black people. I mean, was a blessing to us, white people. Black slavery was a blessing to white people. So slavery to them is like a curse, like black people were cursed to have the slavery. And white people were blessed because they benefited from everything that came with that. That shows you impunity that these people have. That shows you how heartless somebody can be. Black people already know their history. This is a Black History Month. Black people know what their ancestors went through. To put it or to add it in context, you had to say that that's your blessing. Hey, somebody might think that I'm getting away, like I'm overly overreacting over this issue. But when you sit down and just listen deeply, somebody might say that, well, that is true because white Americans have been getting this, getting that, getting this, which is true. White privilege is still there. And this proves people like Tim Wise will always tell you that black privilege is there. People like Louis Farrakhan have told us about these things. And that tells you how they think. But then the same people will want support from black Americans. Tell me, I mean, I don't know. Even if I don't know even how to describe it. You cannot help these people. It is so much hard. The moment black people try to make peace with how these people behave, they are always showing the other side of the truth. And they are saying who they are, and they're telling the world, this is just us, and we are just being us. Maybe add an all to the us that I've talked about. That's what they are becoming. I mean, it's crazy. I don't want to be disrespectful, but that's just how it offends. So brothers and sisters, I want you to watch this video. I'll be back and then we'll be sharing our thoughts in regards to this. But this is not good, right?
But I want to flip that upside down because I think the other side of it is true with our nation's history. We understand the curse that was slavery, white people do, and we say that was bad, but we miss the blessing of slavery, that it actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in and lived in. And so a lot of people call this white privilege, and when you say those two words, it just is like a fuse goes off for a lot of white people because they don't want somebody telling them to check their privilege. And so I know that you and I both have struggled in these days with, hey, if the phrase is the trip up, let's get over the phrase and let's get down to the heart. Sure. Let's get down to what then do you want to call it? And I think maybe a great thing for me is to call it white blessing. That I'm living in the blessing of the curse that happened generationally.
So that was Pastor Louis Gillio of the Passion City Church, an evangelical church in Atlanta that you heard speaking. And sitting there with him was the CEO of Chick-fil-A, Danny Cathy here, and the black man you see nodding his head is Christian hip-hop rap artist Lecrae. Now, that is from a conversation that took place in 2020, and everybody on the stage has released statements or apologies, distancing themselves from that white blessing. But we still never dealt with the mentality that goes into making that statement in the first place. See, here's the thing. What the pastor apologized for, the white blessings comment, and what the other two tried to distance themselves from was not the worst thing that was displayed on that stage. What was displayed is that white people, and I'm not just talking about racists and bigots, have to feel comfortable before they will discuss the effects of race and racism in this country today and the historical perspective that also accompanies it. See, that mentality is why white people, when they do something that is implicitly biased or even a misstep and somebody calls them a racist, they are more concerned about being called a racist than addressing the activities that they did to make people label them a racist. See, Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for 2 weeks for not having an accurate grasp on the historical context of Jews being of a different race according to the Nazis. But the pastor there made just as much of a historical error because slavery did not give birth to white privilege. White privilege gave birth to slavery. Let that sink in.
You know, I'm done with the planet. Just done with it. Knock the fucking moon out of its orbit. Let this bitch just go spinning off into space. I hope the melting core of this planet just stops moving so we don't rotate. So we just spin out in Earth. I'm done. I'm done. We don't know why. Take a look. The blessings of slavery. The blessings. Okay. At this point, the experiment is humanity. It's just, we've reached the end. Let's just be honest, we've reached the end. We have circled all the way back to Neanderthal thinking. It's done. It's fucking done. I mean, where else can we go after this but down? Pretty soon, somebody is going to say, well, rape is no, well, that's already happened. We're never going to learn history because people are going to try to whitewash when they've tried that shit too. God damn. I'm done. I'm fucking done. I am wishing for kaiju. Godzilla, Gamera, I don't care anymore. A flame-throwing lizard, I don't care. I just don't give a fuck anymore. I don't. Like, seriously, what the fuck? Where can we go from this? We got oligarchs in space, the blessings of slavery. Where are we going after this? What human advancement can happen after this? Are we going to get those AI robots? Because I wouldn't mind having the fucking shit that happened in the Animatrix. Just end it. Just fucking end it. Let us blot out the sky. Let the robots take over the year. Turn us all into batteries. Because we no longer need to live. We just don't. Motherfuckers are rehashing shit that we already know was bad. We established that was bad. Holocaust, bad. Slavery, bad. Genocide, bad. And now you got a bunch of fucking history fucking lawyers going, well, actually, fuck it. We're done. We're done. Where's Rao? Just burn the planet. Solar flare. Boom. Fry it all. Let us all live underground like mole people. We can be the Molochs. Just fuck it. We're done. We are fucking done. One solar flare. Fry everything in sight. Turn this bitch into embers. Where is Darkseid? The anti-life equation would be perfect right now. Enslave the whole fucking... I know I'm going to get hit with the shit and I don't care anymore. Just fuck it. It's time to go. It's time to go. Humanity is done. We have reached our zenith and we shit on our zenith. The end. It's time to end this bitch. Let's go.
The blacks were slaves. Did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally 200 years ago to protest against slavery? Did they? No. What did they do? Well, a lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime. Let us help build a church for you, dear folks. And they loved them and taught them how to read so they can read the Bible. And here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They prayed. They sought God's face and they turned from their wicked ways. And God made slavery illegal through several white presidents, right? It worked, didn't it? They didn't protest. Maybe there's a place for protest. I don't know. But there's sometimes that was a wise pastor that warned his flock.
Every time he said the blacks, it was just like, ugh. He said, I remember when you niggers used to just take the captivity and be humble about it. Now you want to complain and you want to protest. Never mind the over 30 documented slave rebellions that we have in this country, and those just the documented ones. Never mind the ways that enslaved people used to break materials and tools to make it where they would mess up the productivity on the plantation in protest. That don't matter. You're supposed to just pray, be docile, and be pacified with the Holy God spirit. And y'all notice when he talked about the good people on the plantation, he was talking about the human traffickers, the enslavers. You know what I'm saying? The same people that want to tell you to stay out the past is the same people that want to romanticize the past where you the enslaver and they get to be on the porch telling you what to do. And you better be grateful about it too. I don't recall any slaves going to DC to protest. You the reason why they don't want them books in the classroom. Do you know why there's such a high population of African Americans in DC? Do you know? Research over me search, I'll let y'all do the point on that one, but don't forget how the Nat Turner's Rebellion had the whole country shook because they were worried about people protesting their captivity. You want to know why there's been such an assault on books and education? It's because they don't want you to learn about how slavery really went down. They don't want you to learn about how people actually felt for their enslavement. They want you to go by what master tell you to think. You see what I'm saying? They want to tell you based off the victims of the plantation, how the plantation was ran. They don't want to tell you what's putting the blood, sweat, and tears, that perspective of the plantation, because it wouldn't be one that favored them. The good people on the plantation would just build them churches. Being able to read was punishable by death, and you gonna tell me they taught them how to read the Bible? Stop lying.
Check out this video.
The blacks were slaves. Did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally 200 years ago to protest against slavery? Did they? No.
When Africans were still held captive by white Christian supremacists 200 years ago, they had no freedom to mobilize. Slave codes made it illegal for enslaved Africans to gather unsupervised. They did this to prevent uprisings and rebellions, and to limit their ability to practice their indigenous spiritual traditions. The punishment for the violation of slave codes included things like being sold and separated from your family, public lashings, mutilation, and in some cases, execution. In fact, in the very time period Mike Keller is referring to, a Supreme Court justice said these words, and it sheds light on the history leading up to that moment in time as well. This was in 1857. They had for more than a century been regarded as beings of an inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. He was bought and sold and treated as an ordinary article of merchandise and traffic whenever a profit could be made by it. This is why we teach about Black history.
What did they do? Well, a lot of good people in the plantations would say, hey, it's wintertime. Let us help build a church for you, dear folks.
Pausing here to hold space for the fact that he said that there was a lot of good people on the plantations. He's talking about enslavers, the people who selectively bred human beings. He paints them as benevolent Christians who were kind enough to build churches for enslaved Africans during the winter, who loved them enough to share the Christian gospel with them, who taught them to read the Bible so they could turn from their wicked ways.
And they loved them and taught them how to read so they can read the Bible. And here's what the blacks did about 150 years ago. They humbled themselves. They prayed. They sought God's face and they turned from their wicked ways, and God made slavery illegal through several white presidents, right? It worked, didn't it? They didn't protest.
What you just heard is not unlike what has been done throughout American history. The people who were enslaving Africans were Christians. The colonizers who spread into West and Central Africa in the 15th century were Christians, and they had to reconcile their actions with their faith throughout history. Dr. Albert Rabbitoe wrote about this in his book, Slave Religion. From the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade, conversion of the slaves to Christianity was viewed by the emerging nations of Western Christendom as justification for enslavement of Africans. He talks here about how their pangs of guilt were alleviated by this narrative, by the idea that if we didn't save them, they would die as pagans and go to hell. And this kind of rationalization was happening in America too. In fact, an 18th century judge in Boston asserted that Africans were rightly slaves because they were heathens, justly acquired as loot in wartime. A 19th century bishop in Louisiana, Auguste Martin, said this: slavery is an eminently Christian work, citing the redemption of millions of human beings coming from the darkest intellectual night to the sweet light of the gospel. So what are the wicked ways being referred to here? Likely their indigenous spiritual traditions. They turned from their wicked ways and prayed to the Christian God, and God redeemed them. This belief is not uncommon in Christian circles. And it's also an issue of theodicy, which is again the kind of theology that wants to question, interrogate, or defend the goodness and justice of God in the face of the existence of evil. White Christians routinely hyper-spiritualize black suffering and in so doing minimize our actual lived experiences. This narrative is another example of that. So no, enslaved Africans didn't turn from their so-called wicked ways. They were indoctrinated, often beaten, not fully allowed to be themselves. And this came at the hands of white Christian supremacists who viewed their ways, their spiritual traditions, their music as wicked and barbaric. And many of the Bible the enslaved were given to use had books removed that enslavers felt could incite rebellion, including half the New Testament and the entire book of Exodus. So whose ways are wicked here? As Janine Hill Fletcher accurately writes in her book, The Sin of White Supremacy, from the Revolution to the Civil War, American institutions were forged with the interests of white Christians at the fore. And the formulation of America as a white Christian nation came by way of genocide, conversion away from indigenous religions, and note this, the suppression of native African practices among those enslaved to build the country. Thank you for watching, and as always, like and follow for more content.
Maybe there's a place for protest. I don't know. But there's sometimes that was a wise pastor that warned his flock. Blacks were slaves. Did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and have a rally?
Now, this guy's supposed to be a preacher, right? He said the blacks were slaves. Did they ever go to Washington, D.C. and protest slavery? 200 years ago. Oh, I can see that right now. Hey, Master Gilmore, me and some old slaves, a couple of thousand, and we're going to go down to Washington, D.C. and protest slavery. I don't even want to finish this one because this is so ridiculous. This man needs to, I don't that's my take on it. You tell me what y'all think about it.
Ago, they humbled themselves. They prayed. They saw.
This man said black people humbled themselves and prayed, and so God delivered them from slavery. And this is why I don't understand black Christians, because this is what they believe. They use the Bible to justify slavery, and then they use the Bible to justify the end of slavery instead of what it really was, which was that somebody woke up and said, yo, maybe we shouldn't be beating and torturing and unaliving and SAing human beings. Nope, it wasn't that. It was we humbled ourselves. And because we finally humbled ourselves, the good Lord said, you are now free, my children. What? Black Christians, is this what they teach in church now? Because I haven't been in a while. What?
Hey y'all, so trigger warning on everything, including slavery. I love this creator right here, but I couldn't stitch it, and I'm not fancy enough to do that. But old Mike Keller is saying that the slaves did not go to Washington and protest. No, Mr. Mike, they did not. But since the 1600s in America, there has been slavery. We stopped allowing the importation of slaves in 1808, and in 1865, the bill was ratified to make the 13th Amendment. And this little lady, she said, I'm not a historian, but hi, I'm a historian. I can tell you a few things. I love her though. No shade. There were several, and I mean several, slave revolts. But here's a few, and you might have heard of them in your history classes where they teach facts. Gabriel Presser revolted in Virginia in 1800, Denmark Vesey in South Carolina in 1822, Nat Turner, Virginia, 1831, and then of course there was the Brown family who were white, my bad, that did a whole ass revolt on Harper's Ferry in 1859, protesting slavery. And the black people, he says in the video, were reformed their wicked ways. What wicked ways, sir? The religions that they were worshiping, that they had worshipped in their homeland before they were ripped away from their family and brought over here to serve white people. And no, they were not taught how to read. That was illegal. And no, they were not.
I mean, I just hope the rest of the world understands why it is so much hard to trust white people. Imagine, there is a preacher who is being an asshole like this. There is a preacher, somebody who's somebody's son is looking up to, that one day they'll teach them about the scripture, that one day they'll teach them about social control, how to live with people. But the same person is telling you who they are and how they perceive these things. And they're telling you in a broad daylight with impunity that we benefited from this and we are still benefiting from this. That's what they're telling you, right? And they're just telling you that in a broad daylight. For me, this seems so much disrespectful, first to black people, and it is humiliating at the same time. And it's like you have a wound and then somebody's coming with a metal and then just pointing to the wound where the wound has not yet healed. And that's what this person is trying to do to black people. I mean, at this moment, honestly, I would say that it is so much hard to trust these people. I'm not always trying to advocate for hate or anything. I'm not. But at this moment, just trying to look what this person can say in a broad daylight. What makes you think? What are they saying in the darkness? What are they saying behind closed doors? Right? This also shows you the perception of Christianity. We'll have to talk about this. And I think this is a point where people call out Christianity for the hypocrisy, the historical hypocrisy that happened. See, the historical hypocrisy that happened with Christianity. I'm a Christian, honestly, but we just have to be honest, right? The hypocrisy that happened with Christianity, all the people that were trusted and given power to talk to direct people, they used this against black people, and they used this to their own advantage. And you see what's just happened. That itself, it's a perfect example of what I'm trying to tell you. And I'm trying to tell you that this is a perfect example of how these people manipulated black people using the scriptures so that they can benefit out of all these atrocities that they did to black people while they leave black people suffer. There's an aspect of hypocrisy. You can't claim that you love God, yet you're treating God's children the way you want and calling that's a curse. And the benefit that comes from that curse, it's a blessing to you. Where? And tell me, how does this work? Right? So this becomes so much diabolical when we see figures who are trusted for so many times saying these things in a broad daylight. Don't you ever forget that they used the Bible to finish black people. We'll just have to agree on that. And this is not out of emotions, right? This is just logical. And sometimes it sends black people to question a number of things that happens around them. Because it is the same thing that they did to your ancestors. It's the same thing that they are still doing today. Because when you see a person have an impunity and they call out each other and saying that, let's just be honest, we have benefited from enslaving you. This has been a blessing to us. We are rich. Our family have had a lot of resources from just what we have taken from you. So that really reveals a lot of things that probably we should be knowing that they are trying to share with people. You know, it's like a thief who steals from you and tells you, you know, you're a good person. And your goodness is why I stole from you. And it's why I will continue stealing from you. And I'm going to benefit from it. And that's what they're trying to say or to do. It is not interesting. It is not something that I'm celebrating, that it is happening to black people in the United States. That's really crazy. This is something which is not tolerated. This is something which is not celebrated. This is something which should be called out because it's crazy. I know, as a matter of fact, not all white people agree with this sentiment. I know, as a matter of fact, I know. But for the people that have the impunity of doing something because they know that black people won't do anything to them, then they come back, do the same thing again, and do the same thing again, and enslave black people for around 400, 500 years, and then come out and say that, you know what? Thank you. Because without you, we couldn't have been this worldly the way we are. And then just one thing that I like to say. This video is so hurting to black people, honestly. As an African, I feel that, right? So you can understand the magnitude or the extent that it has towards other group of people, like black people. Black people, this is my last message. Don't feel useless. Why am I saying so? If you ever feel useless as a black person, if you ever thought that you've never done a great thing in the contribution in art, think about it in this way, that if there couldn't have been a black person, majority of the things that people are seeing right now in the United States, majority of all these talents that they are stealing until today, they couldn't have been having them. And it shows that you are greater than them. And you can imagine, they also had a head start, 300 years head start. But look, black people, although we haven't catched up to them, but we are somewhere coming. And we have black folks that are taking spaces. We have black folks that are telling them, you know what, even with the head start that you had, we're still gonna smoke you. And that's what black people are doing. And I'm really, really great that we get to remind ourselves how great black people are, because it's important. So I really don't know what to think about this video, brothers and sisters, but please let me know. And as you know, I'm your host and presenter Ejidek Stories, but until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony.